Welcome to another episode of the CarSmarts podcast. In today's episode, we talk to a first-time car restorer who has some very funny and also very valuable tips for anyone thinking about restoring an old car. Sit back, relax, and enjoy our conversation on lessons learned when taking a car apart and putting it back together. I want to welcome Marc Sanders to the show. Marc recently finished restoring a 1970 Pontiac Trans Am and posted a list of newbie lessons learned on a Facebook page called Trans Am Lovers. Well, my first car was a 79 Trans Am, so I'm a member of this page, and Marc's post caught my eye as some of the best and funniest advice I've ever heard regarding restoring a car. Thanks for joining me today, Marc.
Thanks for having me.
Is this the first car you've ever restored?
It is, yes. Probably the last one too.
We'll get into that. Where did this car come from? Why a Trans Am?
So this was my wife's dad's car, my father-in-law. He bought the car in about 74, 75, drove it until the mid-80s, and then it was parked in his driveway until 91, and they moved about 80 miles from where they were in California. He rear-ended his own car on the way to the new house. Still drivable, but pretty heavy rear damage. Parked it in his garage when they got to the new house, and it stayed there until 2015 when I finally talked him out of it.
So many stories about cars that are restored that are a former family members or something that was in the garage for a long time, and you have to convince the person eventually to let it go. And
right, yeah. There was about 20 years of jokes about it was going to be my dowry when I married his daughter, and married his daughter, and it didn't happen for another 15 years.
Now, are you a writer or comedian by trade?
I am not, no.
Okay, because this was a pretty funny post. I've heard some of these things before, obviously, but just the way you laid it out was pretty good. So I'm going to read it. We'll go through each point. I'll even read your introduction here. Again, this was on Trans Am Lovers, a Facebook page for people who love Trans Ams of any year, any vintage. So here's Marc's writing. As I come to the end of the restoration adventure on my 70 and look forward to actually enjoying the car, I've been reflecting on some of the things I've learned throughout the process. This car has been a 4-year restoration so far. It started with my wife and I, with the help of family and friends, doing a lot of disassembly and taking a lot of pictures. We then took the car to a family-run small body shop that was willing to work on a pay-as-you-go budget and do the body and chassis of the car the way we wanted it. Basically, a really nice driver, as original as possible, but not Concours or perfect restoration. Ultimately, a great restoration that would endure many years of enjoyment. Here are a few things that this restoration newbie has learned over the last 4 years. Number 1, spend a lot of time figuring how much your restoration is going to cost you. Now double it. You're getting closer. So what were the biggest surprises as you were restoring this 1970 Trans Am?
Yeah, well, you get into it new and you don't think about the small stuff. And I had when I was, 19, I had a 63 Nova, and I replaced the inline six with a 350. And I knew that had nickel and dime me to death. And at 19 years old, that was a bit more impactful than, at 40 something. But you go down the rabbit hole, you look at something and there's a little nicer version of that thing. So you might as well get that and then multiply that by 500 times, and you kind of end up with double or perhaps triple what you thought it might cost.
Mm-hmm. Was there one part in particular on this car that you just blew you away that was like, wow, I wasn't expecting to spend that much, but I need it?
Yeah, the body and paint. I'm not a body and paint guy. I've built motors and stuff, but never been body and paint. I know it's as much art as it is science. And just how extensive the body damage was, it was way below the surface. The car spent 3 hours on a frame rack just to get it straight before it went to start getting body work done. And we ended up replacing essentially all the sheet metal from the top of the rear window back is all new. And that's, when I went to the body shop a couple months after he started and saw that, my jaw kind of hit the floor and, just sort of dollar signs flowing out of the car. So, it was, my body guy did pretty good at managing expectations. Mm-hmm. It's not that bad. It's not as bad as you think. And we, after about a year or two in the body shop, we just sort of hit the point where we said, well, we're going to have this car forever. It's a family car. It's never going to be for sale. And unless we need to feed our kids or something.
Hmm.
So just do what it takes, and we'll get there when we get there. And as nice as the body came out, we started putting a little bit more into some other things, just to, because the car deserves it, and then the history deserves it.
Point number two, similarly, do a lot of thinking about how long it will take. Double that as well. So you went into this thinking maybe 2 years?
Yeah, we were thinking maybe 2 years, 18 months, 2 years, and yeah, it just kept going. I have unfortunately, there's a forum, what was it, Firebird Nation or Firebird something,
Hmm.
and their whole database was lost. But I had chronicled the entire restoration on there. Every month I'd come up and I'd put some pictures up and talk about the experience for that month, what we had done or whatever, with a few lulls in there, and they lost their database. So that entire thread, which was like 4 or 5 pages long, was completely lost, which was pretty disappointing.
Point number three, everything will be dirty. Everything. So much dirt. Well, you probably mean dirt and grease. Did you break down and buy a parts cleaner at some point?
No, I didn't. I had most of the parts that would fit. Well, no, I had everything really blasted. I took it to a professional blasting place. I tried to do some blasting myself with a consumer grade cabinet that I sort of co-own with some friends, and that lasted about 2 hours. And I said, forget this, and everything went in boxes and went over to a professional, and he did a great job. And it was listeners, it was worth the money. Don't even bother. Yeah, they have the right materials and the right machines and stuff, and that stuff was just, I mean, it was pristine, just bare metal on everything, and then had it powder coated. So there were a few things that I did when I got the car back from the body shop. I mean, the Z bar, holy moly, the grease in there, it turned into, I don't even know. I spent 3.5 hours just cleaning out the inside of the Z bar to be able to put grease in it again. It was terrible. But for the most part, I just had it professionally done. I find at this point in my life that I'm better at writing checks than actually doing kind of low work.
Right. And it's amazing. And that car was daily driven for a while too. So it's just amazing how dirt finds its way into every crack and crevice.
Yeah, yeah, and that was in California, not even a winter
Right.
state. So.
Exactly. Number four, your one car can quickly fill an entire 3-car garage, your kids' room, and most of the kitchen once you've turned it into a real life exploded parts diagram.
Yeah.
And if you have any doubt here, just think about how big a car factory is with all all the parts are in bins. They need acres and acres of space. So one car obviously took up a lot of room. What was the last piece to leave the kitchen and go into the car?
Well, it's still there. The car's not quite done. It's about 98%. I still have to upholster the front seats, finish up some trim, and I'm battling an air bubble in the proportioning valve, trying to bleed the brakes right now. So let's see. Right now, I have the seat covers sitting out there, and then some small trim parts for the inside, for the interior, and then just a lot of duplicate parts that I ended up with 2 or 3 of because I didn't like something that I bought, so I bought something else. So I got to get those boxed up and over to storage at some point. But my son's not here anymore, so I took over his room. His room is now the parts counter.
Nice. All right. Point number five. This is a great one. When you're disassembling, you can never take too many pictures. Seriously. When you're putting it back together, the thing you will need a picture of will be just out of the frame every time. Take video too and narrate it. What part went where, how it came off, anything else you might have noticed. You'll thank yourself later. I personally would recommend a wide shot and then a close-up of the part you're taking off so you remember exactly what part of the car it came off of.
Yeah.
Tell me about your experience with photographs.
Not enough. I mean, I've probably close to 1,000 pictures I took during just my phase of disassembly, which was the engine removal and most of the easily unbolted stuff or things that I understand. Some stuff I left on because I've never dealt with it before, so I left it for my builder / chassis guy. But yeah, it seemed everything was just the wrong angle. Like, boy, what plugs in there? And you look, and it's behind the alternator in this pick, and it's behind the carburetor in that pick, and it's just out of frame in the other one. And when I did the dashboard, I did video as we dismantled all the gauges and everything and the wiring harnesses out of the dashboard. And I thought I was being smart, taking video and narrating to myself like an idiot.
Mm-hmm.
And for about 30% of the videos that I took, I hit the button and stopped recording before I started talking. So I had to go back and resort to like the backup pictures that I had taken and it was the same thing where it's the wrong angle for the plug I needed, or
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. And then I also found in that I didn't take enough pictures. I decided to do video, and now it was searching for 6 minutes of video to find the one little
Right.
snippet of what I wanted. So I don't know if there's a perfect way to do it.
Point number 6, bag your parts in Ziplocs with a Post-it note inside the bag detailing what's in the bag. Sharpie rubs off baggies over time. Then you just have a bunch of really crappy gift bags for all the guests at your kid's birthday party. I kind of wish I got bags or car parts as a kid instead of cheap plastic toys, but I get your point here. It's really, really critical, and you'll get into a little bit more in point 7. You talk about organizing as well. So organization's a big deal, a big part of restoration, right?
Yeah. Yes, it is.
Number 7, if you find yourself saying, I'll remember where that goes as you're taking things apart, trust me, you will not. Some of these parts might as well be pieces of the space shuttle's main propulsion unit for all I know. And again, my commentary on this would be that goes for the smallest repairs as well, whether you're removing a valve cover or a carburetor or whatever. Parts suddenly look unfamiliar the very next day. Maybe it's age. I don't know.
Right, yeah. We all know the apocryphal, I have extra parts, I guess I didn't need them. And that's kind of where and 4 years later, I'm out there working on the inside, and I still find myself, I'll put a nut down on the dashboard, as I'm working under the dash. And I'll remember that goes. 45 minutes later, where the hell did that go?
Exactly. Number 8, pay attention to the order that stuff comes off so that you can reassemble in the same order. I'm looking at you, Mr. Z-Bar, hiding above the starter, under the master cylinder, in front of the firewall with the stupid little clips that require a broken wrist, 2 thumbs, and iron skin to manipulate into position. Yeah, I guess if you reassemble things wrong, the car goes backwards in drive or something like that. But yeah, it's kind of important the way things come out.
Yeah, it's and I got some stuff back already put in by my engine guy, and then I had to work around them and stuff. But I mean, a dozen times I've had to go downstairs to my daughter's room, my 16-year-old, and say, honey, I need your skinny arms, and bring her up so she can, jam her arm into some, through the headlight bucket to get to the screw that holds the horn on, because there's no way my meat hooks are getting in there.
Yeah, and sometimes you need 3 or 4 hands. And
Yep.
So
My wife actually ended up getting those clips for the Z-Bar on because I couldn't get in there.
Mm-hmm. Number 9, once you've got all your parts and baggies, get them boxed up in durable plastic totes if you need to store them. Label the outside of the totes with what's in each one. Nothing sucks more than having to go through 37 boxes searching for a part the size of a golf ball that's no longer made or reproduced. If I had to do it again, I'd create a spreadsheet that detailed everything in each box, then number the boxes so I could find things quickly. Wow, how much time did not having a system like this add to the process, do you think?
I don't even want to think about it. It's
a year.
70 is, and the 70 is a tough year for it too, because there's so many weird parts for a 70 Firebird that were 1 year only, and so there's a lot of stuff that if you don't have it, you're using something from another year and it's not quite right. And although that wasn't a huge concern of ours, we're trying to keep it as original as possible. We're just not losing sleep over it.
Right. And in this, in that particular point, you said, if I had to do it again.
Yeah.
If I had to do it again, what do you mean? You don't think a second one would be 10 times easier and more organized?
Yeah, it might be, but I know myself pretty well. And, you get in, like, we were talking about taking pictures of parts as you take them off. And I know, like I said, I'm still leaving nuts on the dashboards, and I'll remember where that goes. And I don't. I just know myself. I'm the guy that I spend half my time looking for the tool I just put down when I'm working on a job.
I think we can all relate to that issue. Number 10, drop something down in the front end of one of these cars and it ends up in an alternate dimension. Yep, that bolt is gone forever. Maybe it'll turn up in another 50 years when my grandkid is doing another restoration.
Yeah. There's half a dozen parts that are hanging out with all my matching socks at this point.
I said it'll probably turn up in the form of a rattle somewhere down the road. You can't trace in the car. There's something's rattling in the back or the front. And it's usually a drop bolt or something like that, or
my
tool.
My experience from my first car, my 79 Camaro, is that they rattle anyway, so hopefully it'll just blend in. Just need more louder exhaust.
That's true. Point number 11, Facebook groups are your friend when you start reassembly and get that baggie with the part that doesn't have a note. And your photos don't give you any clues at all. Well, certainly the internet has had to have increased the speed of restorations and probably the sheer number of people attempting them. I think it's a great help. And I guess back in the old day, you went to your neighbor's house, but now you can go worldwide and ask questions, right?
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, as I'm going and I get stuck, and I'll post a picture on one of these groups on Facebook, and within 10 minutes, I know what I'm looking at, and half the time I feel stupid, but I have the answer, so that's the important part. But I mean, I was doing this 25 years ago with my Nova, who would imagine that now there would be a medium where you
Hmm.
could have a guy tell you how to go to a junkyard and basically spend $600 and you have a 10-second car, from a junk LS motor or something like that.
Right.
It's crazy. This is the golden age of speed. The 60s and 70s, I'm sure, were great. I wasn't around during the early 70s or late 60s, but I mean, come on. If you can't build one of these cars to drive on the street and go really fast anymore, you can go down and buy a 10-second car off a dealer lot.
Point number 12, buy the wiring diagram. Buy the replacement wiring harness if you have any questions about the condition of the original. Copper does not age well. Any breaks in the insulation, and there are breaks in the insulation, will result in corroded wires at best, fire hazard at worst. So this electricity and circuitry to me is it's just another science that I'm not willing to learn.
Right.
How did you get through it?
I had I had an almost car fire when I was much younger with some Mickey Mouse car stereo installation, and huge clouds of smoke coming from behind the dashboard. And I'm a firefighter, so I'm kind of a fire dork. And you put tons of money in these cars. You're putting tens of thousands of dollars into this car. You're gonna keep a wiring harness because why? You want it to be original. Nobody's gonna see your wiring harness. Because you don't want to spend $200. Spend the $200. It's just a safety thing for me. Just modernize it.
Yep. Good tip from a firefighter. Point number 11, the final point before the closing here is, if Amazon says a part fits your car, it's still a crapshoot. Ask any random 5-year-old if it'll fit. They're just as likely to be correct. Okay, so I'm going to read the closing here, and then if you have any other points beyond the 13 we read that you can think of, that maybe you thought of it after you wrote that or anything else, I'll ask you that. So Mark closes here and says, I could go on and on, but this is a pretty decent start. I look forward to being a resource for others doing restorations, just as many on this page have been a huge help to me. I still have a few things to do in this car. I'm certain that the work will never actually stop, but it seems we're at about 95% complete, and it's made me somewhat reflective on the whole process. I look forward to a future of more driving and less check writing. So have you been driving? Have you been enjoying the new Trans? Is it ready for the road? And what other tips might you have thought of?
Yeah, it's not quite ready yet. It's almost there. Next week it goes in to get tuned for the timing and set the carb and everything else. That's quadrajets are beyond my skill set. So I had the carb and the Chevy built for the car, but I'm having a guy go through and check everything and make sure the wiring looks good and do it all in an environment where he has all the tools to do it right. And my kids have heard me swear enough over the last 4 years, so I'll just write a check for that one. As I said, that's what I'm better at these days. Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I have really anything else to add to the list. I think those were the big ones. I'd say, don't let it scare you. It's a process, but if you go at it, with a plan and you go in eyes wide open and you don't have a hard, I guess that's my biggest thing. Don't go into the hard budget. If you only have 20 grand to spend or 30 grand or whatever it is, don't go into the project at the front side saying, okay, and I have 30,000. There's my list of parts, and that's how I'm going to do it, because you will end up with an unfinished project that you end up selling for half of what you spent, and somebody else will finish it. And that's, I guess, the next one. If you're not sure about taking on something like this, which honestly, I don't think I ever would have taken on a project like this if it wasn't the exact car that it is and the history that it has, and it being a family car, and my wife, remembering riding on the hump between the two seats when she was a little girl. We would have done something else, something less rare, something that was maybe already had a start to it or didn't have as extensive body damage. And there were a lot of factors that went into this car that made it a tough first-time project, I think. But yeah, don't let it scare you. Old cars are cool. I mean, if you're listening to this, you obviously already think old cars are cool, so you have that going for you. But yeah, it's fun. There's a lot of swearing and stuff, but I think, and hopefully about 3 weeks when that car actually hits the road, that it'll all be worth it.
That's awesome. Yeah, well, we look forward to it. And I've enjoyed your tips and the stories behind it and the stories behind the car itself. So thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you on the road pretty soon.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the CarSmarts podcast. Please visit our partner websites, ClassicAutomall.com, PhillyAutoShow.com, eledlights.com. Visit CarSmarts Radio for more information, and remember to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. If you like what you hear, please consider becoming a Patreon member for just $2 a month. Go to patreon.com/CarSmartsRadio. The CarSmarts podcast is produced by Artwood Entertainment. Original music by Chris Harding, Harding Entertainment.